All right. We are live, everybody, on the live Fifth Dimension video podcast. Want to welcome everybody to the show. Got my partner here, Mr. Dave Schumacher. Dave, what's up? We're here for another episode.
Here we are. Made it through the cold week of minus 26 without the wind chill and about
Yeah.
minus 60 with it for about 2 days. So we're finally
Yeah.
thawing out. It's about 20 degrees today. So, 46-degree difference. It's awesome. It's a heat
Yeah.
wave. So, yeah, made it through and glad to be back and excited to talk about this topic tonight.
Yeah. It was funny because over the news, talk about this, polar vortex that the East Coast and Midwest are kind of going through right now. It's still not out yet because we're getting it now, but the guy in the news was like, that he couldn't get over that there was a 125-degree difference between the north Midwest and Florida.
Yeah, we're supposed to be up into the 50s on Monday. It's just this weather is nuts.
And then everybody's gonna get sick.
Yep. Well, hopefully we won't get sick anymore since both of us in this house have already had it. So
Yeah,
hoping
yeah,
it skips us.
yeah, right. But
Yep.
anyway, we got a great topic for tonight. But before I continue, like I always do in the beginning of the show, just to get it out of the way, we do have a chat room, which I'm gonna go ahead and make sure it's running. Um, it's on the right side, just so everybody knows like where the chat room is. It's to the right side if you're looking at the screen. Uh, in front of you, there's a video box, and then on the right on our YouTube channel, there's a chat room. It's not much, it's not fancy, but it's there. It's free. It works for us.
Mhm.
So you can interact with us, ask us questions during the show, either on YouTube or if you have a Google account, if you have a Gmail account, whether it be Google Plus. If you have Gmail, that's great. You can email us or contact us through Google Hangouts. Just go to the Google Hangout webpage and email us or contact us with Fifth Dimension Radio. Yeah, I'm sorry. Fifth Dimension Radio Show at gmail.com. If I said that too fast, Fifth Dimension Radio Show at gmail.com. Got it?
I got it, but I
All
know
right.
where it is, so it doesn't matter.
You're cheating then.
Okay,
All
what
right.
am I? That never mind. I won't make the comment about a certain football team. I want to get
Oh,
fired.
go Rams.
Go Rams. Exactly it.
I got money on the game, so you know,
Oh, we're
hoping
voting
for a
for the
big.
Rams just because we hate the Patriots.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, well, everybody I talk to just want to see the underdogs win. I mean, we're all getting kind of tired of it. I mean, the Pats are a great team. I'm not taking anything away from
Oh,
Tom
they're a good
Brady or
team,
anything,
but
but
oh well.
give
It
give
is what it
someone else
is.
a chance.
Yep.
Anyway, all right. So
Okay.
yeah, good luck at the Super Bowl, everybody.
Have fun.
Right.
So, I'm thinking since this is your topic, I'm gonna let you open it up tonight.
All right. So actually, it's good you said it that way because I had talked to Dave on the side about I think it would be kind of cool to have an opening statement, kind of like for each episode. Like if we each of one of us kind of chooses a topic, and we feel kind of, I guess, personal to that topic. It'd be great to have maybe like a personal opening statement about the topic, and then that could kind of be a segue into our conversation for the show. So, yeah, I'm gonna go right into it. So, the topic for this week's episode is spirit photography, which is a really, really huge topic in my opinion as far as the paranormal community goes. Um, it's been around for centuries. Photography. It goes. I don't even want to get back into the history of photography, but I know it goes a long way back, and people have been claiming that they capture spiritual beings or ghosts on digital photography or regular photography. There's different types of photography involved, different types of cameras. You also have video. Video is supposedly now also capturing apparitions, ghosts, or spiritual beings. and whatnot. You have different types of video as well. You have full spectrum now, which is involved in the paranormal. Um, which is ultraviolet light. Basically, it's just modifying the lens to see ultraviolet light. And one of the theories is that we don't see things with the human naked eye, that we see things spiritually for some reason. We still don't know why to this day, but these things supposedly pick up better with infrared, and different types of infrared, of course. You got night vision. We also have the use of thermal imaging. FLIR has been very popular in the paranormal field. So now I've gotten into that a little bit. Um, there's a lot of debunkers out there as far as photography goes. Not just one person in particular. The whole entire globe. Everybody's into debunking and you know picking this out and that out of pictures, and many say it could be a form of pareidolia. Could be matrixing, image matrixing. Brain memory, when you look into a cloud and you see or pick out shapes of an elephant in a cloud, and your brain is remembering that image, per se. And they claim that sometimes a lot of imagery, as far as spirit photography, is involved with that as well. um However, what I do want to point out to people is that before Photoshop, everybody's familiar with Adobe Photoshop, but before Adobe Photoshop was invented back in the day, centuries ago, before we had all this great technology available to us, I'm sure, Dave, it probably took people to a great extent to hoax something back in the day when we didn't have this technology. And, you know, I'm going way back, when we had really, really great photos that I think are legit. There's some really great photos out there from, the early to mid 1800s, where we didn't have this stuff, such as Photoshop, where it's easily to manipulate photos and add things and cut things and paste things. And, now there's like fancy apps out there, apps that create images of ghosts, and you can just put that on any photograph. I mean, fortunately, that's our enemy right now, because, it's hard enough to prove this thing as it is. So I'm going to leave it there. That's my opening statement. Um, yeah, so that's the topic for tonight. Does spirit photography, does digital photography, or does video, thermal imaging, any of this equipment that we use for photography, does it capture spirit? Does it capture ghosts? That's what we're going to talk about. So, Dave, I'll hand it over to you. What do you think about what I said?
Good opening. I'm going to take a slightly different view, which will be good. I'm looking at it through the field of parapsychology. So way back in 1861, William Mumler, he was a jewelry engraver. He was taking pictures and stumbled across what looked like a ghost that came into one of the pictures. And what had really happened back then was, because those cameras were primitive and they needed a very long exposure time, somebody would get into the photo and then get out and they didn't see them. It could be really quick. So this guy looked at it and said, "Hey, that's a ghost. Guess what? I can make an entire business out of this."
Hmm.
So he started, he opened up a shop, and he started taking ghost photos. And that's kind of the beginning, at least in a parapsychology history, where spirit photography started. Then you got a whole bunch of people that used to have seances and sitter groups, and then they would take pictures, and they would see family members show up, and all kinds of strange images would appear. The bad part is some of those, and if you read the literature, actually, you'll be impressed. I think this is a 1977 book. I actually dug out the Handbook of Parapsychology, and they have an entire chapter on paranormal photography, believe it or not.
Nice.
So I haven't read this book in probably 10 years. So thanks, Matt. You made me go digging through all the damn boxes we have down in our basement when we moved. I knew I had a book with a chapter on it.
I had to make Dave work.
It was actually good. I've been looking. I wanted to find this book. So, you read the chapter, and that's where it started. There are obviously, as we know, a lot of frauds back then.
Oh yeah.
And people just kind of looked at it like, ugh, it's just bad. An interesting point they make in this book is that the skeptics actually went out of their way and concocted more crazy ideas for why people were fraudulent than what was really occurring. So not only were the people claiming spirit photographs fraudulent, but so were the skeptics who were trying to debunk them. So the whole thing just went to hell. And it was almost like 30 years that the topic disappeared. Nobody really did much with it until you had people like Ted Saros, where he did the thoughtography, where he could imprint images on the film. So there was a whole slew of those type of studies and experiments, and a lot of those were conducted under very tightly controlled conditions. So then we move up, and a lot of that happened. But of course, at the time, people were, using cameras to take pictures. You got the brown lady. You got some of the other famous ghost photos that we've all seen. The Madonna of Bachelor's Grove Cemetery that was taken with a infrared film camera by Dale Kaczmarek, I believe his name. Marie Huff took the picture, but she was there with Dale Kaczmarek at Bachelor's Grove Cemetery, which, by the way, we live about an hour and a half from. So, Matt, if you ever come visit, we can take you over there.
Yeah,
we actually went there with my kids one time and had my daughter reenact the actual sitting on the tombstone and took her picture, but it was a lot of fun. Anyway, nice. So off topic a little bit. So the thoughtography and the parapsychology part of it has a pretty rich history. And what they thought was happening is a lot of the pictures back then were psychokinetic or PK, mind over matter. They were somehow imprinting an image on the film. Of course, there were those that did it fraudulently again, but there's also ones where people couldn't explain that. So there's always been controversy, and it's, not even what goes on today. It's way back there with the early beginnings of this. So then came along digital cameras. Then people are starting to get orbs. Well, are orbs dust? Are they bugs? Are they lens flare? I mean, there's at least 2 or 3 different articles that have been published that show that there may not be something to it, but there are instances where people actually see energy or forms of light that take pictures of them that have no natural, normal explanations. If, for example, if you look at some of the stuff from what was it? The Entity, the movie, the story The Entity was based out of. They actually had some very peculiar pictures that looked like light streaks. And they said at the time they were all over the place and arcing and going across the room. And the key is you see some of them in the corner, but they're not the light. If it's like a flashlight or reflected light, it would be bent in the corner of the wall, but it's not. It's arcing over the wall. Right. So there's some sort of anomalous energy there. And then
I know that, just not to interrupt you real quick, I know the gentleman that was involved in that investigation, which was Dr. Barry Taft.
Barry Taft, yep.
Also, very widely recognized parapsychologist. And he was also a science advisor for the movie The Entity as well.
Yep. Yeah, one of our favorite movies.
Yeah, good friend of mine, actually.
Cool. So then you get up to today, we already hit the orbs, but parapsychology and psychologists have looked at it. They've had people interpret anomalous photos, and based on the context, is it a UFO? Is it a ghost? If it's up in the sky and it's a blob of light, it's a UFO. If it's in an old house, it's a ghost. But there's a couple interesting studies where they not only looked at environmental conditions and where people have picked up and reported things and where psychics reported things, but they did do series of photographs. And there's at least one study where they noted that in areas where people, they had 2 things. They had a haunted location and a not haunted location right next door. And within the haunted location, they had sites where things were said to have happened and sites where things didn't happen. And what they found when they took photos is there were anomalous photos that occurred more predominantly in areas in the haunted location and only in the areas where people reported things. So, could there be something to it? There could be. Unfortunately, as you said, Matt, there's a lot of crap. There's a lot of Photoshop. There's a lot of people trying to pull one over on people. But there actually is, surprisingly, some published literature out there that indicates that you may get some strange photos in areas that have been deemed to be haunted. Now, is
Yeah,
it due to the environment? Is it an electrostatic discharge? Is it a magnetic field? They don't know. But it is
right.
interesting that they're finding some correlation between where people reported things and what they deem as a haunted site and where they got some anomalous photos. So I think I'm going to stop there before I bore everybody to death and throw it back over to you.
No, I'm not boring at all. I mean, it's really insightful because I think one of the main issues with the current state of the field when it comes to spirit photography is you get a person that gets excited to be on the investigation. They have a point and shoot camera. It doesn't matter what it is, whether it's a Sony Cybershot or, you got a nice big Canon 35 millimeter, and they're excited to be at a haunted, notorious haunted location or investigation, and they just want to try to see what they could capture. And that's great. I'm not taking anything away from that, but I think if we really want to prove that there's something to spirit photography, like Dave is mentioning, I think we would have to really go with specific tests and ways of testing, like doing positive and negative controls, kind of like how we did our experiment, Dave, over at that location that we worked at together. Doing positive and control testing. You know, take pictures in a positive spot, take pictures in a negative spot, make comparisons. Do environmental readings, see if there's environmental factors. I think there are specific tests and protocol that you can take and measures when it comes to doing photography, and then I think you can make a judgment whether or not you could throw it out. And the other thing, just to add a little bit more to that, is I mean, from my team, unfortunately, because you have lens flare and dust and hair particles floating around. You have, I mean, dust is unpredictable with the airflow, constantly going in different direction. So and with infrared, you could have things, superimposed and, making it look like different things when it's not really anything different other than just being a dust particle or a hair particle. But I think if proper tests were done on investigation in a much more controlled situation, I think maybe people would have better argument.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you look at some of the articles that are out there, again, I got a couple of them. Um, Journal of Scientific Exploration, analysis of contextual variables and incidents of photographic anomalies at an alleged haunt and control site. Terhune Ventola and James Haran. This paper is from 2007, and I'm going to bet most people that are involved in the paranormal, ghost hunting investigations have no idea. And they describe how they carried out the study, how they assessed the photos, how they took them, and how they made any correlations with how or where people said they had things happen in other environmental readings. So that's one of them. So that's 2007. That's only 12 years old. If you go to another one, here's one from the Journal of the American Society for Psychical Research from 1995.
Nice.
And they do something very similar where they collect data. They did photos, video, random number generators, temperature, humidity, light, all that stuff. And they explain in great detail how to analyze that type of stuff. And once again, they had some video evidence or data, I should say, not quite evidence yet, but video data that was anomalous, and they couldn't find a natural explanation. And one of the key things in both of these is both sets of authors and researchers were more than willing to bring in a photography expert to take a look at what they had and tell them what their thoughts are. So there are definitely ways to do this as you describe, but it's just a matter of, finding it out. And believe me, this is not easy stuff to find. I mean, I remember
No.
years ago when I first dug this stuff up, I had to go to the University of Wisconsin-Madison library and go get them. So they're not easy, and you have to pay to make copies. I get
Right.
it. It costs money, but there are ways to do this. And what you just described and said That's exactly what they've done here. So people really need
Nice. Yeah.
to do that. And as you said, if they follow these ways of doing things, what they get becomes a lot more important and a lot more powerful.
Yeah, and if we can replicate that and put that out there, and the more that you put that out there, the more people will follow that protocol, and the more stronger their argument with that photograph is. You know, trust me,
Yeah.
you would never know that we throw out, like, I would say 98% of all of our photographs, and it doesn't matter what kind of piece of technology we're using, whether it's a thermal imaging camera, full spectrum video camera, or digital, camera, it don't matter. Like, we throw out, like, 98% of our stuff because we sit there, we go through it, we go, "Well, you know, I don't wanna present something where if we're first of all, as investigators, if you all don't agree on something, you can't have one person just because they're so keen on it being something that they're gonna present it to a location. Yeah, I think this is something. We don't go like that. I don't know about anybody else, but if we don't all agree on something, then we just toss it out. But when it comes to photos, it is so hard to really you know, pick something out of a photo just because of all those reasons that Dave mentioned. Dust particles, bugs, lens flare. Um, the things that people forget to think about is the lens on a camera, okay, is not a normal lens. It superimposes things. And not only that, if it has infrared, it has, those infrared lights have spaces. It's on a little circuit board inside the camera. And if something passes along that circuit board, it's going to look like it's like pulsating or like giving a pulsating light because it's going in between. And the way it floats in between the infrared lights, that's the effect it's going to get. You can get really technical as you want, but it is just, I just think doing tests and doing those things are just so important. And I don't see
Yeah.
enough of that. I really don't see enough of it.
Yeah, it is important, and it's not only knowing about it, but understanding it, how to actually do it. And then
Hmm.
also, as you pointed out, understanding what the equipment can and can't do, what
Hmm.
the limitations are, what is it going to be able to capture and what isn't, and what are some of
Yeah.
the little tricks of the trade, and really understand just really what you're doing, and have a great appreciation for the limitations of the equipment.
Hmm. Now, one of the things I want to bring up is when it comes to skeptics and photography. I love this subject just because of the way skeptics approach photographs, especially older photographs, because you know you have better technology today than you had back then. And like I said earlier with my opening statement, it is so hard to come up with a legitimate, a
Yeah.
really hard hoax back in the day because we didn't have this technology available. And you would have to go at extreme lengths to come up with a hoax. And I'm talking 1800s and back, as soon as early as photography started and spiritual photography. Um, but I'm talking like photos, like there's some really great photos out there. Now, I'm not saying it's real or not real, but like one, for example, that stands out to me is the one at Boot Hill, where you have the cowboy guy by the headstone, and you know it looks like an apparition standing like, but it's just his head, next to the headstone. And skeptics will sit there and go, "Oh, that's fake." Or yeah, you can pick at this, you can pick at that, you could say, well, the light is, shining down this way, but my argument is you weren't there. You don't know the exact environment it was in. You cannot 100% recreate that same scenario as that picture that day was taken. And I'm going to go further into that. Now, there was an investigation that I invited a skeptic on, and I thought I captured something interesting on video. And we tried to set up a recreation of that same event that we captured on the video just to be sure that it wasn't something like light play or light shining in through a window from a car headlights, or something from the outside. And like we for a whole hour, like no joke, it took us an hour to debunk that piece of video, and we actually debunked it by accident. Unfortunately, it wasn't anything, but it was just the way somebody walked by with a flashlight, and the way the flashlight hit certain lights in the room, and it just kind of like it created the same effect that that we captured on the video. Anyway, long story short, my point is you're never going to get 100% exact to recreate that scenario. So all you can really offer is your opinion. And they go around like, "Oh, that's a hoax. That can't be real." Without really getting technical about it.
Yeah, and I would say also that just because something can be recreated doesn't mean it didn't happen.
Mhm.
I mean, you want to get into conspiracy theorists as an example. We can
Do it.
recreate
Do it.
landing on the we can recreate landing on the moon, which their
That's a that's
claim
a
is
that's a good one.
because you can recreate it, it didn't
Yes.
happen.
Mhm.
Give me a freaking break. I mean, I have no tolerance for that kind of stuff. But I mean, just because you can recreate it, and I think it was Factor. What was that one with the FBI guy Ben
Factor.
Factor? Yeah,
Great
and
great
the
show.
whole thing was it was funny because one of those shows for my line of work, I knew it was one where somebody thought they saw a UFO in Michigan, and he actually went and he talked to one of the aerial application people that I know very well. And they somewhat recreated it with an airplane. But as this guy said, he goes, just because we recreated it and the way they edited that and the bias of trying to prove it wasn't what it was, doesn't mean whoever the witness was didn't see what they saw because it was not an exact recreation. So that's another
Mhm.
problem.
Right.
So there's things going on where you just because you can recreate it, I can recreate. I mean, really, we can recreate any anomalous environmental reading. Really, if you want to make an EMF spike, hit your walkie-talkie button or turn your cell phone on. Okay,
Yeah.
so we
Yeah.
recreated it, but does that mean that it didn't happen, or people didn't have the experience, or it may not be paranormal? Not necessarily. And some of the times when you're looking for natural explanations to things, I've seen stuff where people will come up with a slew of things that would have to happen naturally. That there's, if you think about the probabilities of all these things happening at the same time, like, oh, that ghost in the house was, bad vision or carbon monoxide, and there was a thunderstorm that night, and there was some weird earthquake. I mean, some of the stuff that they come up with is just ridiculous. So yes, you do need to look at natural explanations. You need to debunk things, but just because you can recreate them doesn't always mean that it didn't happen or there's another explanation.
Yeah. No, I agree 100%. It's what they always argue, Dave, bias confirmation, you know?
Yeah. So yeah, I guess the tough part comes though is what is it that we're capturing on any of this audio, video, photography equipment? What's it capturing, and how is it getting there?
Yeah.
So to me,
Well, yeah,
that's a quandary.
yeah,
That's a bit
yeah,
of a
right?
challenge
Yeah.
because and Lloyd Auerbach, and one of the stories um, that I remember him telling, and I wish he would have published it, is he had people that had the exact same camera positioned in the exact same location. And he had people who believed in orbs and people who didn't believe in orbs. And he had them go and take pictures. And what he found, which again, he didn't publish, so it's a little circumstantial at this point at best,
Mm.
is that the people who believed in the orbs actually got more orb photos versus the people who did not believe in them. So that throws another wrench into the mix here of is it something that you maybe, even if it is a somewhat non-natural, maybe shall we say paranormal explanation, is it something where you're creating it with a mind matter interaction versus something really being there? I don't know. It makes it complicated.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, I would love to know, like, I mean, the theory, of course, we all know the theory if you're into the paranormal. The idea is that, again, we don't see things with the naked eye, so they think that for some reason that infrared and all this great technology such as thermal imaging, full spectrum, again, I should really say ultraviolet light because that's what full spectrum is. People get the wrong idea of that full spectrum, and you know, um, I mean, that's the theory, and I, I tend to lean that there could be something going on with that only because it seems to be that people are coming up with stuff under that scope rather than regular photography. But again, maybe do a test, run tests with regular photography versus, the type of technology that's used, make a comparison, make a judgment by that.
Yeah,
I
I,
mean,
I think more people need to do that because they're just throwing things together and putting them out there, and it
yeah,
really does need to be tested. I don't think a lot of stuff in this field, including photos and video, have been thoroughly tested.
yeah.
And it's one thing to sit at your house and recreate it and make a ghost photo, but it's another thing to start looking at doing those type of tests in a haunted versus a non-haunted situation, because you can't take it out of context. You really do need to test it where people say these things are happening.
Hmm.
And that gets back again to, just because you can recreate it doesn't mean it didn't happen. So if you're going to do tests, you definitely need to do tests. And I like some of the papers that I kind of talked about because they did a test in a location that was haunted and one that wasn't haunted. But even in the haunted location, they picked areas that were haunted, where reports of things happen, and other areas where they didn't. And I
Hmm.
think that's really the only way we're going to ever get at, is there even a correlation between anomalous photos or video and haunted locations?
Hmm. What are some old photographs, Dave, that you think are kind of possibly legit that you've come across in your years of doing this research?
Boy,
Yeah,
there's
there's quite a few that stand out. Like one of them, you just mentioned, like the one with Dr. Barry Taff.
yeah, that's
That kid.
probably, to tell you the truth, that might be one of the very, very few that there's not a good explanation for.
Yeah.
Um, it's hard to say because, as much as you're not there, you don't know. And a lot of these classic photos that, as especially when I was younger and a kid, I have a book from way back, and I used to sit there and stare at these supposed ghost photos, and I was just amazed. And then the dream killers come along, and you find out that they weren't really legitimate. I mean, there's stuff. I guess it depends on how credible the people are who took the photos and how much you want to believe them,
Hmm.
because that's what it comes down to. And one of the main ones is, what is it? The Brown Lady of Raynham Hall.
Mm.
That's one of the ones, and I'll kind of, yeah, Jen pulled it up here, so you can kind of see that's one of the ones that, a lot of people go back and say that that's a good legitimate photo. But the argument of if it's legitimate or not depends on if you believe the people who were taking the photos or not.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you take them as credible and they're not trying to fake anything, or it's not a misunderstanding, it's a great photo. But
Right.
it's been a lot of people have debunked it,
Yeah.
supposedly.
Yeah.
So the entity one, that one's one of the bigger ones. And I don't know, some of them are just too good to be true. It's hard to say. I mean,
Mm.
I really have a hard time looking at them. I'm going to admit, I am not a photo or a video expert. So I always have to defer to somebody else. I'm more into the environmental data collection and analysis and statistical, looking at the statistical effects. But I'm not a big I have no expertise in video and photo, so I usually defer to somebody. But there are the ones that, you know, you read the entire report and the circumstances, like, geez, there's got to be something to that, and the entity's one of them. And there's some other ones where there's some obscure literature that people took pictures at the time people were passing away, and people in the room noted this luminous glow leave the body.
Mm,
And there's actually photos where you get some light anomalies. So it correlates with the time of death, it correlates with what people experience, and you have a photo of it. So those type of things you start looking at going, oh, okay, maybe there is something to it. And then now I'm starting to think, well, maybe there might be more to it, because you look at some of this new stuff with biophotons, and
mm,
people emit biophotons and they're finding them at supposedly haunted locations, and mediums that claim to be talking to deceased people. There's an increase in biophotons. And of course, biophotons can be photographed with very specialized equipment. So maybe there's something out there. But as far as actual photos that I think are legit and believable, there's very few. And again, the entity and the brown lady are probably the two I always go back to. But again, I do understand and I acknowledge that the brown lady has been supposedly debunked many times over.
right, right.
I'm
I
not
like.
sure. I hope the one at Bachelor's Grove is true, but I just there's been some people coming forward that said that may
Mm,
have been staged, and then other people say no, it wasn't. So who knows?
yeah, who knows? But I like that one too, and I just you gotta investigate the. Unfortunately, the older photos are hard because we don't have time machines and we can't go back in time and interview the right people and know the actual technology that they use, because let's just face it, they don't have that kind of camera system anymore, really. And if you come across the same type of camera that they used back in that time period when they took that photo, you're very lucky and fortunate if you come across that same piece of equipment where you could say, all right, let's see if we can try to establish how they did it. I think that would be a great way of investigating if there's a true legitimate photograph of something. That could be a good way of investigating a photograph. Um, but unfortunately, like when you have older photographs like that, those people aren't around anymore. That piece of equipment's not around anymore. So there's really not much that you can offer as far as investigating that specific photograph, except for sitting behind a keyboard and giving your opinion about it.
Yeah, and one of the other ones I just thought of recently, well, recently, like 10, 15 years ago, um, Jen had a conference with the Southern Wisconsin Paranormal Research Group in Janesville, and there's a person who is really into Bachelor's Grove Cemetery, Pete Crapia, and he got us into contact with somebody who took a very interesting photo. They heard a noise in the woods, kind of behind the fence, off into the woods. And when they took a picture and developed it, looked at it later, it looked like a man on a horse. Of course, one of the stories is that a farmer on with a plow, I believe it was a plow, the horse got spooked, ran into the little pond there, and they both died, the
Mm,
horse and the farmer. The interesting thing is that a couple years later, somebody else, totally different group, was down there and took a photo in roughly the same area. And they didn't know about this because it's not out on the web anywhere and it hasn't been talked about. But they got almost an exact duplicate of that man on a horse.
wow.
So that one to me is really interesting, and I'm
Mm,
sorry, I apologize that I don't remember who took the photos. I'd have to dig into it. I think we have some of their old presentations. I could look it up, but I remember just sitting there going, "Now that is something real interesting. I'd love for people to take more photos in that area and try to see if they can't get it to happen again, and maybe check out the history a little bit more and see if that actually did happen." But that one to me was, I don't know if it's proof or good, but to me it's intriguing. It really gets you thinking maybe there is something.
yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, Bachelor's Grove Cemetery. I can't wait to visit. I'm gonna definitely come in April, I think, and I'm gonna drive the I'm gonna suck it up. I'm gonna drive the 12 hours over to Dave. It'll be worth the trip. But
How fast you
it,
going if you make it here in 12 hours?
it
17,
to 16 or
14 to
more.
60. But if you make it in 12, I won't say anything.
Oh, okay.
He's taking the company jet. Don't you know the fifth dimension company jet?
I
We
rounded off
teleport.
numbers. I don't know.
We just teleport.
Taking a mental vacation.
So
It,
yeah,
the,
I don't know. What ones are you do you think are pretty good? Excuse me.
I'm with you as far as the brown lady, from the UK. You know, you said Rainham Hall, I think, right?
Yep.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's definitely, I think, an argumentative one. I don't know if I believe I don't know if I believe the bunkers of that one, but because like I said, when you have an old photograph, I don't know how hard or easier it's going to be to try to debunk something that old. So I don't know how they are able to debunk things like that, in my opinion. But I like the cemetery Boot Hill, with the cowboy, which again
Yeah.
they've claimed that they debunked that one. That's one of my favorite ones. Or
I
you
think
got the
Gettysburg
guy.
has some too, right? Doesn't Gettysburg have some pretty good ones?
Yeah, oh, they have some amazing photographs. We had an investigator that was with us once a few years ago. I can't remember his last name, but his first name was Chris. This is going back many years ago, but when we were down in Gettysburg, we were on Sachs Bridge. Everybody loves Sachs Bridge because there's a lot of really great stories of experiences and
I think we came
photography.
down and went to that with you and Tim
Yeah,
Vickers
we
one
took yeah we
time.
took a
Yeah, it was
yeah
fun.
we took
That was a
yeah
good
we
time.
took a big group photo down there. Yeah. Um. So the investigator that was with us at the time, it was that night. I don't remember the time of year it was, but it was that night, and he took this picture and showed up this huge mist out of nowhere. And I'm sorry, there was like only a couple of us around, and our breaths, even if it was cold, couldn't create that much like breath to cause this big anomaly just to show up. And I don't know about the humidity and the water and the temperature, how much effect on the environment plays into spirit photography as well, like causing mist and stuff. But this thing really looked like a horse, and it was a horse and a like a soldier on the horse, and something to that effect. But I'd have to dig for that photo. But yeah, I have to share that with you sometime if I could find it. But
Yeah, definitely.
um, but it wasn't something that I know for a fact was faked because I was there when he took the photograph, so I know exactly what he was doing with what equipment. And it wasn't like he was going there. Oh, let me fake this and boom. So yeah, Gettysburg has great stuff. But the one thing you mentioned, Dave, during what you were saying before about photons is interesting to me because our science advisor on our team, Jeffrey Owens Katz, who has a degree in parapsychology and he also has a PhD. He graduated from the a university over in England, and he believes that during certain investigations that we've come across that with using certain cameras that we've kind of gotten something interesting where we've had these blips of light just kind of like appear out of nowhere, like almost as if like somebody's taking a picture with a flash and you see the flash go off, and it only happens for a split second and then it's gone in an instant, but there's nobody around taking photographs with a flash around the video camera. And he thinks that possibly what the infrared is picking up on are certain maybe photon effects of what photons are doing, like when they appear during a paranormal event, which is I
Huh.
find interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. If you ever looked at some of the work done with the Mesa system, it's another data logging system, and the work
Mhm.
that I think it's Tim Hart has done, that they have an infrared sensor on their system, and they detect changes in infrared, and they've found some interesting hits on the infrared sensor. On UV, our dead system, we've run UVA and UVB sensors, and one of the things we did was work with a psychologist, therapist in this area that's involved in induced after death communications therapy, which he's not going to tell you it's supernatural or paranormal. It's just something that seems to help.
Mhm.
But we got some interesting hits on the UV side when people claimed that they were having experiences, and it also correlated with some changes in the random number generator.
Right.
So yeah, that was interesting as well.
Mm. Yeah, so maybe there is something to photons, appearing, or, whatever it is that they do when there's a paranormal experience or an event that takes place, whether it be, an apparition trying to form or manifest, or, some kind of paranormal activity is about to happen. And maybe it's just something, it's just definitely something out of my league to understand. That's why I leave it to my science advisor to
Yeah, and it just needs to be tested more, and there are ways to test it.
yeah.
It's not just with photos and video, but it's again, we've talked about this multiple times. It's everything. And
Hmm.
it's really almost coming up with a protocol and going back to basics and collecting information. Because I think a
Hmm.
lot of the stuff we have, it hasn't been described in enough detail on how it was collected, and the appropriate studies and stuff haven't been set up enough, and therefore it is easy to debunk that type of stuff because it doesn't have the proper controls, which you don't need to be in a lab to do this stuff. So let's stop with that, because you can do decent field studies, and it's possible. You just have to set them right and do the statistics right. And actually, there's a good argument to be made that if you're trying to study something in a complex environment that involves a location and people, you don't get the same good quality data in a lab, because you've taken them out of um, that whole situation. So you really need to have it done where it's happening. So that's just another argument.
Hmm. No, I
So
agree.
your science advisor, who was it? I don't know. I think you've told me before.
Yeah, Jeffrey Owen Katz,
Okay,
KATZ.
that's
Yeah,
yep. I think you've told me about him before. He's
yeah,
the parapsychology guy
yeah. We
and
have a
psychology.
couple of yeah, we have a couple of parapsychologists on our group. We also
Okay.
have Donna McCormick. She's got a
Oh yeah,
really, yeah,
I think I've heard of her.
yeah. She's actually with one of those associations that have been around since the 1800s.
Okay,
Yep.
cool. Well, hopefully
Yeah.
they're still active with your group.
Yeah.
That's a
No, they are.
good resource to have.
Yeah, definitely. They're an asset to our team, and I totally appreciate their input, because there's nothing better to have a person with that kind of background to help, in a paranormal situation. So, um,
Yeah, and
we
I mean, definitely back in the day, I remember I talked with and consulted with William Roll a couple times, which was
cool.
invaluable. And Lloyd Auerbach, he's got his master's in
By the way,
parapsychology.
happy birthday, Lloyd. It's his birthday
Yeah,
today.
happy birthday, Lloyd.
Oh, happy birthday,
Shout out.
Lloyd Auerbach.
Yeah,
His
and
birthday today.
Michael Persinger and his graduate students. So when you have a resource like that, definitely lean on it. I also
Hmm.
used to talk. He was not a parapsychologist, but Jason Braithwaite was a neuroscientist in the UK. He did a lot of stuff with fluxgate manometers and did some great work there. So anybody that you can get and consult with like that, like you have with those people, it's invaluable.
Oh,
It's
definitely.
definitely a real plus for your team.
Yeah, no, I agree, 100%. Um, so I just want to let our listeners know that we're talking about spirit photography. We've been kind of rambling on about the topic, so I don't want to forget about our listeners that are watching the show or listening to our show. We have actually have somebody in the chat room. We have Mary Lou, who's a good friend of mine. She's in the chat room. when I mentioned.
All right, we got a live one.
We got a live one.
We got one. Does she have any
Yep.
questions?
So if she has
Anything?
any
Comments?
yeah,
Come on.
yeah. If she's listening, if you got questions for us, we're talking about spirit photography. Feel free. So
Matt will answer any question. So go.
so yeah, well, I'll answer them the best I can. Doesn't mean I'll have an answer. So anyway, yeah. So if you joined us late, another way that you can call into our show is if you have a Gmail account, you have a Google Plus account, or you have a Google Hangout account. You can, check us out that way. Contact us at Fifth Dimension Radio Show at gmail.com. I'll be happy to answer calls that way, or go on our YouTube and you can ask questions in the chat room. And don't forget to hit the bell at the top right corner of the YouTube channel. You can subscribe. We have a new subscriber, Dave. We had another person subscribe to our show, which is
All
great.
right.
Yep.
Progress.
Progress. Hey, one a week, I'm happy with.
Before you know it, you're going to have a stalker, Matt.
I already have one.
Oh, God. I hope.
Yeah.
Is it living or dead?
No, living. Well, I've had both, so
You got to get a picture of them. Come on.
I don't know which one is worse.
I think I'm way more afraid of what the living can do versus anything that a perceived dead person could do.
I don't know. Have you had a flashlight thrown at your head?
I have not, but Jen had something happen. So yeah, I guess it depends. I've also had some pretty jerky people in my life. So,
Yeah.
So a flashlight versus what other people could do. Yeah, I know the flashlight's bad, but I'll take that.
Yeah. No, I agree, 100%.
It's hard to return fire on a ghost.
Yeah. So Mary Lou just she's just listening while drawing. So okay, whatever floats your
All
boat.
right. So I guess the thing I always come back to is though, what are these cameras and what's the UV, what's the IR, what's the video, what's the cell phones, what's the still photographs? What are they capturing? I mean, how is that getting on the medium that's being used to record the photograph or the video? So that and I'll acknowledge that is a weak point in the field, and a weak point in parapsychology is there's a real lack of any hypotheses that kind of describe how that could happen.
Yeah.
So that's an important thing, but it's not critical to establish that there could be a phenomena, because things could still happen. We just don't understand how they happen. We don't know the mechanism right now, which is an okay place to be, because as we've talked about throughout this show and other ones, is that we need to establish there is actually some sort of correlation between what people see and places that are deemed to be haunted in pictures and photographs and other readings.
Right.
So just because we don't know how it happens, that's not a reason to say it doesn't happen.
Right.
And that is an argument I hear from the other side of the fence many times is, well, you don't have an idea of how it works, so it can't happen.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous. That's what science is. You observe data or a phenomena, and you collect further data to create a hypothesis to test, and then you test it, and then you figure it out, and then you get into how things actually work and what the mechanism is. So it's just not good to say because there is no physical explanation for it, it doesn't happen. That's just not right.
No, it's not. And in my closing statement of the show, what isn't right also, one thing I want to really strongly point out here is if, and I don't care what this person thinks about this statement. If they want to contact me, but it's bullshit when you have a person who's a grieving parent and they lose their loved one, or, a son or a daughter, and they, you know, have this claim of capturing their loved one that passed on suddenly, and now they have this empty space in their heart and in their life that they can't get back. And as investigators, we always talk about the amount of damage that you can cause to a person emotionally and mentally. As an investigator, if you lack that experience or knowledge about that situation, and if you're going to go and make an assessment about something that you know nothing about, I think you should just keep your mouth shut and not cause that damage that is already there. Because there's nothing like a grieving person over a loved one that you miss so greatly. I can't imagine. I'm not a parent, but if that happened to my son or daughter, I wouldn't know what to say. And I'm sorry, but it angers me and it pisses me off when I see people out there trying to entertain the idea and destroy, emotional feelings and belief about somebody's loved one that has passed on, that they believe they caught in a photograph. I think, things of that nature should be left alone, and I just say leave it be, let that person grieve, let that person have their moment. It has nothing to do with trying to prove, anything spiritual. It has nothing to prove about ghosts. It has nothing to prove about what we do. That person was grieving. That person lost somebody in their life that they'll never get back. And I want you to strongly think about that, because that pisses me off. And I don't think that person should go in that, with that approach. I just think it's wrong. And I'm just going to leave it at that.
And there's a lot of literature that's starting to come out that as you go through the grieving process, obviously there's a lot of documented evidence of people that sense or see or hear the presence of a loved one after they're gone. And it actually is part of the healing process, and it can be therapeutic. There was actually, and there was a recent study, and I think it was by Julie Beschel, and I would have to look into it and make sure that's who it was by. But they looked at people who had lost a loved one who went and saw a psychic or a medium. And regardless of if what they told them was real or not, it brought comfort to the person who was grieving. So, yeah, I mean, it's two separate things. Is it something that could possibly help the grieving process and help move on versus is it actually real paranormal phenomena?
Hmm.
So sometimes you got to know, when to take a look at it and when to draw the line and kind of let a grieving parent obviously uh, do what they need to do to get beyond the loss of a loved one. And in
Yeah.
this case, I think you're talking about a child that had died and passed away.
Hmm.
And I guess the only advice I would give to families is, if you have something like that, I know me personally, I wouldn't post it on the internet. Not that there's anything wrong with it. They're sharing with the world. That's what people do on social media. I mean, it just, yeah, as you know, unfortunately, anytime you put something on the internet,
Yeah.
eek, it's free game.
Yeah.
And I just, from my point of view, if God forbid anything like that happened to me, I don't think I would be social about it. But then again, I'm not a big social media person. I rarely share anything personal on my Facebook page. It's all group related or show related. So
Yeah. Yeah.
believe me, I am not criticizing those people at all.
No.
And a lot of people put that stuff out there, and that's great. But it's part of the healing and grieving process.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there are certain things where you got to draw a line in the sand and kind of
Yeah.
be done with it. Yep.
Yeah. My point about my closing statement, just to further my point, was that I don't think that person was trying to prove anything remotely, to the public what that photograph was as far as the science of the paranormal. I think that person was just probably sharing their feelings that this could potentially be their loved one, their son that they lost. And I think maybe it got blown out of proportion by the public, because somebody probably said something along the line that, oh, this person's putting this out there, so they're claiming it's something, and they probably ran it from there, and it just blew out of proportion. And I feel so terrible for the parents. I feel terrible for the
It,
mother that
it's tough.
she,
It's tough.
yeah,
But unfortunately, there's shysters out there, and there was a situation that Jen had a really good friend, and I kind of knew the guy a little bit. He passed away, and in order to honor him and his memory, we put a picture of him and his name on the website. And some so-called psychic decided to call us up and say they had a message from him, and it was complete absolute bullshit what the person was saying. And that was somebody really taking advantage of a really sad situation. And in that part of it, to me, that was a total disgrace to anybody who claims to be a psychic or a medium. And it was really a play eventually to get money and to get more information. And we knew from the beginning that the person was full of crap. And it's just, it goes both ways. And there's bad situations and there's good situations. So, you just got to take a look at it and personally decide what you want to do. And if you act and do certain things in a certain way, there's consequences for everything.
Yeah, exactly. That was well said. Mary Lou in the chat room said, grief is a powerful thing and leaves a person very vulnerable emotionally and physically. So kind of along the lines of what we just said. So yeah, I agree with her.
Yep. So look at that, Matt. Another hour.
Another hour gone, just like that.
And a bunch of people can't ever get back.
Nice. All right. Well, again, as always, I hope you guys liked the show. If you did or if you didn't, please give us some constructive criticism if you like the audio or if you hated the audio. If there's any issues with the quality of our show, feel free to message us, either comment on our YouTube channel. You can privately message us on Facebook if you wish. We have a Facebook page. It's, believe the Fifth Dimension Live Video Podcast. If you look us up on Facebook, please leave a comment there. We post our show everywhere, so you can't miss our show. It'll always be there in case you miss it.
If you like the show, Dave Schumacher is the person to contact. If you didn't like the show, please contact Matt Haas. Just kidding.
Hate mail goes to
hate mail goes to Matt because my feelings get hurt very easily. I'm a sensitive guy.
I don't know about that. I've been told I'm overly sensitive, so I think I got you by a mile.
Matt, you just need to tell people to shut up.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway,
all right. So
go ahead.
I wish everybody good luck in the Super Bowl this weekend. May the best team win. And I don't know, any closing thoughts, Dave, or?
Nope, just keep doing what we always say is collect information, collect data, do it the right way, try to learn, keep learning. You're going to realize we still don't know a whole heck of a lot about the paranormal, and we don't have everything figured out in the natural physical world either. So there's no answers right now. We just need to keep looking.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's a learning field, and that's all it is. I mean, in my opinion, even though there could be experts in our field, but right now in my opinion, there are no experts. I don't.
And if anybody has some really good photos, send them along or post them on the Facebook page. That'd be great.
Yeah. We had a discussion about spirit photography. If you have some classic ones that we missed, that can't be debunked or you think are legitimate, or if you have ones yourselves you'd like to share and get our opinion, we'd be happy to talk about it on the show. I think that'd be great. That's another great idea. You have any question about anything, feel free, send it along.
If I remember, I'll try to post some of the references for the articles and stuff that I talked about tonight.
Cool.
All right.
So have a great weekend, everybody, and we'll see you next time.
All right. We'll catch you next time. Have a good week, everyone.
All right.